Finally, and well worth the wait, to our speaker, Pen Turner. Now, who hasn't written their bucket list of things to do before we die? You've now got the card. Who hasn't made those New Year resolutions to fulfil our potential in life? Well, I certainly have, and like most of us, I've failed to carry them through. Well, here is one lady who not only wrote the list, she wrote the whole book and changed her life forever. Please give a warm welcome to Pen Turner.
Thanks very much for that. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for inviting me to come and talk to you. Now, I call my talk Travels with a Penguin, but I better make clear at first, it's not a talk about penguins, though I do mention them a couple of times. It's not even a talk about travels, in that it's not one of those where I went on my holiday sort of talks. What it is it's a talk about wish lists. Now, we've all probably got a wish list or a bucket list, even if you don't think of it like that. Just to sort of have a quick head count, how many of you could think of a time when you started a sentence saying, one day I'm going to, or I've always wanted to? So let's just have a show of hands. Put your hand up. Okay, quite a lot. Now keep them up a minute. Now only put them down if you did the thing you're thinking about. So we've got quite a few unfulfilled wishes here. Well, what my talk is about is, like everyone else, I had a wish list, but the difference is I actually changed what was a low point in my life into an opportunity to go and do the things on my list by walking away from my old life and travelling around the world to do as many of the things on my list as I could. So in my talk, I'm going to start by telling you how I got to that point. Then I'll spend a little time talking about some of the things I did on my travels. And then to finish, I'll come back to the idea of wish lists and get you to think about some of the things on your own list. So when my story starts, I'm in my 50s, I'm living in London. I work in a college, a further education college. I work in the library there, and if you'd asked me, I'd have said my life was quite good. I enjoyed my job. I was lucky enough to be able to walk to work and back, which in London is quite unusual, so I didn't have any horrible commute. I had a nice house. I paid off my mortgage. I had a dog who I loved. I had lots of friends, lots of hobbies. So life was quite good. The only thing that worried me was the yogurt pots. Once a week I had to do a late night at work. I didn't finish till 8, so I'd get home getting on for 8:30. And by that time I was feeling quite hungry. So in order to stave off the hunger pains through the evening and stop the readers complaining about my stomach rumbling, I used to buy a yogurt pot. One of the, the square ones with the fruit in the corner. That was just enough to keep me going. But I started to worry every time I bought one, sort of, gosh, is it Tuesday again already? And I just got this growing sense of unease that the weeks and the months and the years just seemed to be flipping past, and I didn't seem to be doing anything with them. But I carried on, going to work, coming home, eating yogurts. What brought everything to a head was that my dog died. Now here she is, this was a few months before she died. She was quite an old lady, and anyone who's lost a beloved pet knows the holes it leaves in your life when that happens. And it made me look at everything else in my life, and all of a sudden the picture all seemed a lot bleaker. Our college had had a new principal a couple of years before, and she was going through every department like a dose of salts. And it was obvious that she'd get round to our department eventually, so my job didn't seem quite as secure as it once was. At home, I'd broken up with my partner, and so there wasn't anyone special in my life. And a few days after Bella died, I actually remember saying to somebody, I don't feel my life's got anything for me anymore. But I'm the sort of person who says it's not what happens to you that's important, it's how you react to it. So I started thinking, well, if this life's got nothing for me, therefore I'm in the wrong one. So maybe I ought to think about getting a new life and finding one that does offer me something. So at that point I was thinking about, okay, I'll get a new job, maybe away from London, because my family had all left London by then. In fact, my parents had retired and moved up here to Shropshire. So I was thinking, there's nothing to hold me in London, I'll move out of London, find another job, get another house, start over again. The idea didn't really worry me. Although I had lots of friends and hobbies, my hobbies were all things I could have done anywhere in the country, and a lot of my friends were people I connected with through the internet anyway, so it didn't really matter where we were physically. In fact, my best friend, the person I spoke to every day and the one I shared everything with, lived on the other side of the world in New Zealand. And I still think of her as my best friend, even though we're half a planet away. So, having had this idea, I started to feel a bit more positive. It gave me something to work on. I might still be sitting at the bottom of a hole, but at least instead of looking at the walls around me, I was looking at the sky up above. And then I had a eureka moment, of all places, in the gym. Now, if any of you have been to the gym, you know that you're pounding away at the exercises, so your body's occupied and your brain's trying to do something else because it doesn't really want to be there. And that morning I'd had an email from one of my friends asking how I was, because she knew how much Bella had meant to me, and I was pounding away on the machine and thinking in my head about what I was going to say to her about my new idea about starting over again. And then I went on to think, oh, it would be lovely to go and see her in California, and my friend in New Zealand, and my friends in Australia. And this was a dream I'd often had, but it had only ever stayed a dream, because I knew that in order to go and see everybody and have, to do it all properly, it would take months, and my work wouldn't allow me to have that much time off. And even if I could, I wouldn't have wanted to leave the dog for that long. Hang on a minute, I haven't got the dog anymore, and I've already decided to leave work. So the two things that were holding me back aren't there anymore. This is what I want to talk about wish lists. We all have wish lists. We all have things we'd love to do. And we all often have reasons why we're not doing them, and they're often perfectly good reasons. But we're so used to saying, oh, I'd love to do so-and-so, but I can't because. And then we forget what the because is, and we just get stuck on the I can't. And it was a shock to me to realise that the because no longer applied, and I can do it. So this is what I said, what had been a low point in my life had suddenly become an opportunity. If I was going to give up my job, sell my home, and I didn't have any ties or anyone dependent on me, instead of this being looked on as a bad thing, this was a golden opportunity. Before I tied myself down to a new job, new mortgage, new house, whatever, I'd take 6 months or so, I'd go around the world, see all my friends, do all the things I'd always wanted to do. So I started planning. I didn't have to rush off immediately. Even just making the decision made me feel a lot better. So, and it's a wonderful feeling to sit down with a blank piece of paper and think, what's all the things I've always wanted to do? Write them all down. And it soon became clear I couldn't do everything or go everywhere that was on my list. Some places would be easier to go to actually from short trips from England. So I put those to one side. Others, I couldn't go all across America and all across Canada, both, if I wanted to do a whole circuit around the world. So I sort of put some of those to one side. But I ended up with writing down as many of my friends and as many of the things I wanted to do as possible, and then trying to join all the dots as much as I could. And ended up with a pattern like this. I actually decided initially I was going to head west, and so I'd start with the culture that was closest to my own, and I'd head across America, and then from America to New Zealand, and then from there to Australia, from there to Japan, and there to Sri Lanka, and then back home. I decided early on that I'd travel as much as possible by land transport, because I was there to see the countries rather than by plane. Obviously I had to do planes from one continent to the other, but most of the time I tried to go by train or bus, because if you're driving you've got to focus on the road, you can't watch the scenery. So I decided to do public transport as much as I could. I also decided wherever possible I would stay I would avoid hotels, because I tend to think hotels are designed to isolate you from the country you're staying in. You know, you go in a hotel and you've got the bathroom there and the bed there and the table there with the TV on, and you could be in London or Moscow or Tokyo or anywhere. But if you're in a Japanese ryokan, which is their equivalent of a bed and breakfast, and when you first walk in you have to take your shoes off and put house slippers on, and then you go up to your bedroom and you have to take the house slippers off to go into your bedroom because it's got tatami mats down. And then when you want to go to the bathroom, you come out of your bedroom, you put your house slippers on, you go to the bathroom, you take your house slippers off, you put the bathroom slippers on, because they have this idea that you don't walk bathroom germs around the house. And then you come out and you do all that in reverse. So you really know you're in a different culture then. When I told all my friends what I was doing, I got various different reactions. It was quite interesting. The first one said, "Gosh, aren't you lucky?" And I thought, well, not really, no. I started doing this because I was feeling really depressed and that my life didn't have anything for me. The second lot said, "Aren't you brave?" And I thought, well, no, I don't feel brave. You know, I'm not going to a war zone. I'm not hacking my way up the Amazon. But I came to realise what they thought of as brave was the idea I was walking away from my own life into the unknown. Whereas from my perspective, there was nothing any longer to hold me in that life. So there was more drawing me away than there was holding me there. And the third reaction was, "Can I come too?" And I used to say, "Yes, sure." And if everybody had said that and come along, I'd have needed a bus. But then I used to say that, and they used to, "Oh, I'd love to, but I can't because of the kids or my parents or my job or my mortgage." And again, this is going back to what I said about we all have wishes, but there's often reasons why we can't do them. So, why travel with a penguin? Here he is. This is Scott. He was a present from a friend, and he came with a little label on saying Scott of the Antarctic. He needs a scarf and a woolly hat because he comes from a cold climate. But he'd been to get-togethers with some of my internet group friends in this country, so the ones in all the other countries knew about him, so they all said, "Oh, you know, we've got to meet Scott." So Scott had to come along. He was also quite useful if I wanted to take a photo to mark an occasion, like here I was arriving in New Zealand, or often if I wanted to take a photo to give a scale of something. You know, if I want to take a photo of a rock that's been thrown out of a volcano, well, a rock just is a rock. Whereas if you put him on it, and then it's a rock. So it gave an idea of the force of the volcano that could have thrown that rock out. So I'll now talk a little bit about some of the highlights of my trip. Now, there's often a danger when you're travelling, or if you've looked forward to something for a long time, when you actually get to do it, it's not quite how you imagined, and it's a bit of a letdown. Luckily, I never found this. All the things that were on my wish list that I did, I had an absolutely wonderful time. So I'm going to talk a little bit first about what I call the planned highlights, the ones that were on the bucket list. Now the first one was visiting Kennedy Space Centre. Now I'm the generation, and I expect a lot of you are, who grew up during the Apollo moonshots. And so this had been on my wish list probably since I was about 9 years old. I went there, and it was quite a special time for them because it was just as they were getting the last shuttle ready for launch. I've still got on my wish list to see a rocket launch. I haven't managed to do that yet. That's something I hope to do at one point. But just to go round Kennedy Space Station was an amazing place and brought back all the feelings I'd had in the 60s watching the moonshots. When I first went in, you know, they checked you through the ticket desk and everything, and the gentleman on the ticket desk, as Americans so often do, finished off by saying, "Have a nice day." I looked at him and said, "I've been waiting to do this for 40 years. I'm going to have a nice day." The second thing on my bucket list in America was the Grand Canyon. Has anybody been there? Yeah. Photos don't do it justice, do they? I'd first seen the Grand Canyon about 30 years before. I'd been on a package trip that involved a stay in Las Vegas and then a flight over the Grand Canyon in a light aircraft, one of those that you go, and you look to your left, and then you look to your right, and then you look in the paper bag they put in front of you. And in between looking in the little paper bag, I was looking down the bottom there and thinking, I want to go down there, and I want to go right down to the bottom. And I did, on a mule. Scott is probably, I'm not sure about this, he is probably the only penguin to have been to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I don't think they get a lot of penguins down there. But we did this mule ride. It takes a whole day to go down. Then you stay at the bottom in a camp, and it takes another day to come back up. And then it takes another day after that to stop walking like John Wayne. But the scenery is absolutely fantastic. There's one particular point where the path is going down, and there's a rocky wall on this side, so you can't see anything. But you look down past your left knee, and there's about 200 feet until you see something down there. But the mules are really sure-footed, and they tell you when they start that they've been going for 100 years and they've never had a fatality, and there aren't many forms of transport who can say that. But there's one particular point where you're going up and you've got this wall beside you, and then you climb up and you go round a point, and then as you get to the top of that point, the whole thing opens up around you, and you've got this like 300-degree view around you. And they call that the Jesus corner. Because depending on how you feel, you either go, Jesus, or Jesus. But that was definitely something that lived up to its expectations. So from America, I went to New Zealand, and New Zealand was my favourite place, I think, of all the places I visited. I love the scenery's wonderful, the wildlife is amazing, the people are lovely, the people's attitude to the wildlife is really great. This particular picture is Milford Sound. Has anybody been to New Zealand?
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a few. I always tell people, if you're going to go to New Zealand, don't just take a guidebook, take a thesaurus as well, because you'll overuse words like beautiful, stunning, magnificent, amazing. They get seriously overworked. So from New Zealand, I went to Australia. This particular picture is a highlight in more ways than one. I'm standing on the top of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. If you can see here, you've got the Opera House. So you're standing, you walk up one side of the bridge, across the top and down the other, and you're about the same height above all the traffic as the top of the London Eye. But if you notice, I'm attached here. So there's this cable that runs all the way up, along and down, and everybody wears a belt which is a bit like a construction worker's belt with a metal thing through it, and then there's a metal cable that physically attaches you to the side of the bridge, so there's no way you can fall off, get blown off or anything. So you're in no danger. And everything about the walks have been very carefully thought out. Everything is designed so there's nothing that can fall, because obviously they don't want somebody driving along to have suddenly somebody's camera or something drop on top of them. So you're not allowed anything in your pockets. You're wearing overalls, so that's all tight. Your hat is attached to the back of your jacket. Even my glasses had to have a piece of string around them, so if they blew off, they wouldn't fall. And do you remember what your mums used to do with your gloves with a bit of elastic? Same sort of idea. Just better. Okay. Right. The next stop after Australia was Japan. And that's something that's been a place that had been on my wish list since I was at primary school, when I had a Japanese friend there who went back to Japan. Unfortunately, I lost touch with her later, but I did have other pen pals over there. And I'd always wanted to see Japan. I loved it's beautiful scenery, the architecture, the history. Japanese people are lovely. Everything's so clean. I never saw any graffiti or vandalism. They're even doing things like washing down the ticket machines in the stations. Everything's so neat and everything's so well ordered. Just to give you an idea, if you're on a train, you're on a train and somebody's phone goes off and they're jabbering away, so you get to hear all their private business that you'd rather not. There, if you're on a train and your phone goes off, you're expected to get up and go and stand in the corridor between the carriages to have your conversation there. And nobody thinks of disobeying this. It's just, you just wouldn't do it. So I love Japan. I toured around, I saw all sorts of things. At one point I was staying with a pen friend, and she and another group of ladies, we all went out on a girls' shopping trip. And they took me to this department store that had one whole floor that specialised in kimonos and all the things that you have to wear with kimonos. And all along one wall was all the ladies' kimonos of all different styles, summer ones, winter ones, formal ones, all different things. And right at the end, there was a few wedding kimonos, and the stitching, the fabric on them was absolutely beautiful. And this one's got cranes on, which is a symbol of good luck. And I was looking at this thing, and my friend was telling me how she got married in the full kimono get-up with the wig and the shoes and the sash and everything. And what I didn't know was one of her friends had gone over and talked to one of the shop assistants, who came over, gave a little bow, and proceeded to put this beautiful costume on me. It's really, really heavy. And I'm standing there, and the romantic side of me is saying, "Quick, somebody find me a Japanese husband." And the practical side of me is saying, "This thing's probably worth hundreds of pounds, I don't dare move." But it was a wonderful moment. And my last stop on my trip was Sri Lanka. Now, this is a place I wanted to go. This particular place is called Srewsbury. It's somewhere I had read about in my early 20s. In a science fiction book. The science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke lived a lot of his life in Sri Lanka, and this particular book, called Fountains of Paradise, incorporates some features of Sri Lanka and some of its history into this science fiction story. So I've read about this place 30 odd years before, and that would be lovely to go, but I never ever imagined I'd get there, because back in the 70s, going to Sri Lanka was about as exotic as going to the moon. So when I actually came to it and went there, and I could walk around this place, and Sri Lanka has an amazing history. It makes England look new. Just to give you an idea, this palace was built in 400 AD. The feet there that you see, at one point there was a whole lion's head carved above it, and the idea was in order to go and see the king, you had to walk up through the lion's mouth. So talk about intimidating you before you start. And the grounds of this palace had fountains, you know, the equivalent of Versailles. And this was, like I said, 400 AD, so about the time that the Romans were leaving Roxeter for the barbarians. And like with most tourist attractions, there's often lots of people around. And I was just really lucky with this photo. A friend said, oh, I'll take your picture. And I sat there, and just suddenly all the crowds parted. And there was just me there. And it was just one of those, I've got to pinch myself because I can't really believe I'm here. So as well as what I call the planned highlights, there was a lot of unplanned highlights. In Sri Lanka, we saw elephants. I saw a wild one crossing the road, which was absolutely, you know, made my day. Penguins we saw in New Zealand and Australia. Not all penguins need snow and ice. This particular one is called a yellow-eyed penguin, and we went down to see them in New Zealand. I had quite a lot of highlights involving wildlife in one way or another. In Japan, I had a dragonfly. Their dragonflies have got wingspans about 4 inches long. They're beautiful creatures. And I had one land on my hand, which apparently is a very lucky thing to do. So I've got a very blurry picture trying to take it with the other hand. But that was a beautiful moment. When I was in Australia, I worked for a couple of weeks as a volunteer in a wildlife sanctuary, and there I got to do all sorts of things like feed parrots by hand, and their tongues tickle when they pick the food off your hand, throw dead mice to a kookaburra for his lunch. I held a koala. I had my ear licked by a dingo, baby dog biscuits by the way, and I took a wombat for a walk on a lead. But one thing that had been on my wish list before I left was to see whales and dolphins, and I was lucky enough to see those both in New Zealand and in Australia. I was down there in their winter, so when I got to Sydney, the whales were all heading north from the Arctic, which obviously was the Antarctic, which was freezing up at that time, and they were heading north up the side of up the east coast of Australia. So they were all herring past Sydney, not stopping for anything. But later on, I saw them up in Hervey Bay, and that had been where they were all heading for. And that's where the females have their calves, and then they mate for next year. And all the whales are just there, relaxing, enjoying the warm water, hanging around. And so you could go out on a boat and watch these. And the boats have regulations that when the boat sees a whale, it stops 100 metres from the whale. The whales, however, don't have any regulations, and the whales will surface right next to the boat, and then they'll roll on their side and look at you, which is a rather strange feeling. I was actually on the side of the boat when a whale surfaced right next to the side, and when he exhaled, my face got wet. And someone said, oh, he's blown you a kiss. So, how many people could say they've been kissed by a whale? And most of these whales we were seeing were humpbacks, and then our spotter, who was talking to us on the PA system, came on to say that they'd had a report from another boat to say that a southern right whale had been seen in the bay. And he said this was very unusual because the southern right whales, their numbers are still very low because they were so heavily hunted. And he'd only ever seen 3 or 4 of them. So he said, well, go over and see if we can see this. So we went over to the position this other boat had told us, and we stopped because we could see this whale in the distance, just lying on the surface. And our spotter was telling us, he said, you won't get very good pictures because unlike the humpbacks, a southern right whale doesn't have a dorsal fin, and when they submerge they go down at a very shallow angle, unlike the humpback, which is called humpback because it does a curve, so that's why you get such nice pictures. So he said, don't expect to see very much. Anyway, I think this whale heard him. 50 feet in front of the boat. I think he was going, I'll show him. And of course, we all just went, wow! And he erupted from the water, smashed back down, And then there was a silence, and our spotter said, please, somebody tell me they got a photo. And one lady had actually had her camera up at the right moment, and she was kind enough to give me the picture. So we came back with big smiles on our face, because we'd seen things that not even our boat people had seen before. So another thing that's been on my list was volcanoes. I've always had a fascination with volcanoes, probably because we haven't got any here. And I wanted to see smoking volcanoes. I'd still like to see an erupting one at some point, from a nice safe distance. But as you see, this one was smoking here, so tick that one off the list. I also got to see geysers and hot mud pools and bathe in thermal streams. In Japan, I went to their volcanic area, and there's one place where they've got a smoking mountain and a lake at the bottom that you can see bubbling, and then the lake runs down into a stream that goes through a wood, and so you can follow it down through the wood, and they've built a little platform so you can sit in the middle of the wood, take your shoes and socks off, and bathe your feet in a hot stream. It's quite an amazing feeling. If anybody thinks, by the way, this one in the background looks familiar, if you've seen the Lord of the Rings film, this was the model for Mount Doom. Because of course Peter Jackson was a New Zealander, and he said, I want it to look like that. But one of the most amazing things connected with volcanoes was when I first started talking with my New Zealand friend, she told me she had a weekend cottage on an island in the Bay of Auckland. And the island was 600 years old. Now, of course, we're doing all this by email, so I emailed back and said, did you miss a few noughts off that? She said, no, the island came out of the sea 600 years ago. I said, you're kidding, you can't have a piece of geography that's 600 years old. She said, yes. So we went there, and we climbed up it. It's quite tall, it's the tallest point in Auckland. And all the time, I'm telling myself, this hill wasn't here when they were building Westminster Abbey. That's hard to get your head around, really. But my moving experience happened here. Does anybody recognise this place?
Hiroshima.
Hiroshima, yes. This is what they call the Avon building. And then you've got the river here, and then on this side you have the Peace Park with all the with the cenotaph and all the memorials from countries around the world. Now, Hiroshima was a place I think everybody should go. I actually found it a very beautiful and peaceful city, and I really enjoyed my stay there. But on the second night there, something extraordinary happened. I was coming back from centre of town over there to where my hostel was, and on my way across the river, I thought, I can hear singing. So I followed my ears, and in the dark, standing here on the riverbank, was a group of 20 or so Japanese school children, all neatly dressed, all standing facing out across the river towards the Avon building, singing. Quite a complicated song, the girls were doing a descant. And then when the song finished, another young boy stepped forward, reading something. And I don't know any Japanese, but from the way he was talking, it sounded like some sort of prayer or dedication. And then when he finished, he stepped back, and all the children turned round, and they picked up things that had been by their feet that I realised were lanterns. And they lit these lanterns, and then they floated them on the river down in front of the Avon building. And that was just so beautiful and so moving. And I just felt really lucky that I just happened to have come across this. And it was a wonderful moment. So obviously I have a lot more things that happened to me, but you know, I've only got limited time to tell you. So I came back home feeling a very different person from the one that I'd left. I was very glad, in fact, that I had burned my boats, given up my job and everything, because there was no way I could have my old life. I'd changed too much. My original plan had been to go back into a very similar job, to look for another library job. But by the time I came back, I thought, no, I've moved on too far. I can't go back to that sort of work. I was a lot more confident, more self-reliant, more flexible, more used to coping with problems. My attitude now is something goes wrong is, okay, what's plan B? So I can't say I can solve everything, but I'm more used to dealing with things when they do go wrong. So after I came back, my father, like I said, my parents had retired here to Shropshire. My dad was still alive by then, and he said I could stay with him while I looked for work. And I was looking all over the country because not having a house, I didn't really mind where I lived. You know, the hard part's finding a job. You can find a house after that. It took me about a year to find a job, and I ended up finding a job in Shropshire, which I didn't intend doing, but it's worked out fine and I enjoy it. And then it took me another year to find somewhere to live and to settle down again. So now I can eat the yogurt pots and not worry about them. But while I was doing all this, if I was telling people how I got here, they kept saying, oh, yeah, you're amazing. And I thought, no, I'm not amazing. The only difference is I actually decided to do the things I was talking about. So I just decided, while I was travelling, I'd written a blog to keep my friends at home in touch with what I was doing. So I took this blog and turned it into a book. It was going to be one book. It ended up being 4 books, which are now on Amazon if you want to read any more about my travels. The first one is about how I came to make the decision and follows me across America. The second one's New Zealand. The third one's Australia, and also looks at how I dealt with things that went wrong. And the fourth one is the Japan and Sri Lanka, and ends up by getting the readers to look at their own wish lists and think about them, and maybe they could do something about them. And so now it's your turn. When you came in, you were all given a card. So it all says, one day I'm going to. So what I want you to do is to think about something that you've got on your wish list. I'm not going to ask anyone to share this, but just think about something that you'd like to do and write it down. So you want to take a few minutes to do that now, and then I'll talk a bit about it later. Did anybody not get a card? Have to be anything life-changing like going around the world. It could be something like join the writing group and write that novel you've always wanted to. Read War and Peace, join a choir. So just something that you've said to yourself, oh, I've always wanted to do so and so. So just give you a couple of minutes to write something down. Has everybody got something now? Okay. So Now I want you to look at your card, look at what you've written, and ask yourself, why haven't I done that yet? Now, like I said earlier, we often have good reasons for not doing the things that we'd like to. So I've just got a few of the reasons here, and you can see if yours is one of them. So the first one is lack of time. Now this is where I was with mine. It's something a lot of people say, you know, obviously if you're, you know, someone's a young mum with 3 kids and a full-time job, they haven't got time to do a PhD or go across the Sahara on a bicycle. But you've got to, this is what you've got to bear in mind, what it is that's holding you back. Then you can realise when it doesn't apply anymore. Next reason might be lack of money. Another very good reason. I've got a Morris Minor and I turned up in it recently, and a friend said, oh, I've always wanted one of those, and I know he's retired and got sort of, you know, some spare money. So I said, why don't you get one? He said, oh, I couldn't afford it. I said, do you know how much they are? He said, no. I said, well, how do you know you can't afford it then? In fact, when I told him, it was only about half as much as he thought it was. So that's the first thing. If you're not, you know, find out how much it is, whatever it is you want to do. Find out if there's any other ways of doing it. If you've always wanted to go on a cruise, can you get any last-minute deals? When I was in Sri Lanka, I met a couple who were on a honeymoon, and when they got married, they both had their own places, so they hadn't needed the sort of wedding presents like, you know, toasters and table mats and things that people normally give. So they'd asked all their friends to give them holiday vouchers for this particular company. So most of their holiday had been paid for by their wedding presents, which I thought was a lovely idea, because at least their friends knew they were getting something they wanted. So, you know, if you've got a birthday or something coming up and you'd like, you know, you'd love to have a, you know, a weekend pampering in a health spa or tea at the Ritz or something, or tell your family, because they probably want to know what to get you anyway. Third one, lack of knowledge. Another very good reason. Now, me coming from being a librarian, I'd say start by asking in your library, are there any books on the subject? If you're an internet person, go on the internet. Is there a local club or a national club that can help you learn beekeeping or how to do the Charleston or something? Growing up in London, as I said earlier, I'd always been interested in space and space travel, and I'd wanted to do astronomy, but you can't do astronomy in London, there's just too much night glare. Once I knew I was settled in Shropshire, I found the local astronomy society and joined it. And last summer I managed to tick another item off my bucket list by seeing Saturn through a telescope from my own back garden, which is a beautiful sight. And the last one, lack of nerve. This is often the hardest one to overcome. Now, this might be your nerve, it might be somebody else's. You know, I've had someone say, oh, I'd love to take a cruise, but my husband only ever wants to go to Weymouth. Well, ask him, you know, go home and say, darling, you know, maybe just this once. You know, ask him if he's got any special wishes. He might want to turn the loft into a scale-electric track. Lack of nerve is often the hardest one. The hardest thing to do is to decide you're going to do it and to take that first step. But once you've taken the first step, the other steps are easier. But you notice I've got nothing there about being too old. I gave this talk recently to a WI, and at the end, one of the ladies came up to me and she said, I'd always wanted to learn to fly. So when I was 80, I decided to take flying lessons. So I said, brilliant, how'd you get on? She said, well, that was a couple of years ago. I've just had a knee replacement. When that's mended, we're going to do aerobatics. So that's one person who's really not going to get on. So, right. So what I want you to do with those cards is take them home, put it in a drawer, put it on a notice board, stick it on the fridge, but just occasionally look at it and say to yourself, Am I ready to do this yet? What you don't want to do is to look at it and say that. I wish I'd done this when I had the chance. Now, my last slide is something I saw when I was on my travels. A shopkeeper in one place used to put out a thought for the day. Sometimes funny ones, sometimes serious ones. And I saw this and it really summed up just how I felt. One day your life will flash before your eyes. Make sure it's worth watching. Thanks very much.
Oh, anybody any questions for Pen? Yes?
Yeah. How long did your world trip take, and how much of it did you plan when you moved from place to place? Was it in place before you went, or did you just go with the flow?
It took 6 months, just over 6 months altogether. I planned it to the extent that I knew the start and end point of each country, because I had the flights booked, and some of the bigger highlights like the Grand Canyon trip and the walk on Sydney Harbour Bridge I had booked in advance. A lot of the others I just had a note like, I'm going to be spending 3 days in New Orleans, here's a list of all the possible things I might like to do, and when I get there I'll decide what to do. Because I wouldn't want to plan my entire life for the next 6 months. I think you just get too bored with it. Sorry?
How did you cope with the insurance?
You can get round the world insurance, very easy.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you just say you want world travel insurance, yeah. And before I went, I made sure I had all the right injections, especially because I knew I was going to be working with animals. I had tetanus and things like that, so I sort of prepared myself in that way. Yes?
That picture at the beginning of your job, Bella, did you take that?
That's a photo. Yes, yes, yeah. No, I'm afraid I'm not talented in painting.
Of all the places that you visited, have you ever thought, well, this is the place I'd like to make home?
Yes, New Zealand. Unfortunately, I did actually look at that when I came home, because I thought, well, when I was job hunting and not having any luck, I thought, well, okay, let's have a look about going there. But I was towards the top end of the age range that they take for immigration. So the only options, therefore, would be for me to either get very, very rich when they take me anyway, or marry a New Zealander. And my New Zealand friend, look, we haven't got enough men left to go round for ourselves, I'm not ready to do I love Japan. I wouldn't mind, I'd certainly go back there. I wouldn't even mind going to do something like teach English there, because I really love their way of life and that, but I don't think I'd want to live there permanently. Any more? Yes? Now I actually do surveys for government. I travel all around Shropshire. I think one reason I got the job was they thought, well, if she can travel around the world, she can travel around Japan on buses, she's not going to get lost around Shropshire. Yes?
Have you still got another wish list?
Oh, definitely, yes. I'd hate to get to the point where I'd done everything and been everywhere. You might as well just give up and stay in bed. No, I've still got lots of things I want to do. I'm still working. I've knocked a few things off it since I came back. Like I managed to get to Iceland last year, which was one of the places on the list. And like I said, I've seen Saturn through my telescope. But there's still plenty of places I want to go, still plenty of things I want to do.
Okay now, well, thank you so much, Pen, for your honesty, because contrary to what I would have thought, you can only do your bucket list things when you're at the top of your confidence and you feel you can and all the rest of it. And it happened to you at a low point in life, so that's a bit of news for me, that's really good. And the effects on you that you changed too much to restart your own life also is a bit of a revelation, I think, to me. But it turns out that the good thing you were looking for, you found here in Shropshire, for which we're all great. Thank you very much indeed.